9:31 is the time. You're listening to WBOR Brunswick, 91.1 FM and WBOR.org. That right there is the Daniel Bennett Group. And it's with that I welcome to the show Daniel Bennett. Good morning, Daniel.
And good morning to you, Peter. Good to be here.
It's such a pleasure to have you join the program this morning. Thanks for making it happen. And as you said, getting up early. You had a late gig last night, I understand.
Yeah, but you know it's funny. Like I told you, the funny thing is I'm one of those strange people I'm kind of a night owl, but I'm also a morning person. Which maybe that's a bad thing, but it's a good thing in some ways. So
okay, a hybrid.
I'm wide awake, man. I'm like ready to go.
Right. Okay. So you're definitely not a decaf person then.
No.
Okay.
No. In fact, I woke up, the first thing I did this morning, there's a Starbucks right across the street from my apartment. I got up at like 6 and I went over and got some more whole beans and got that all brewed up. So I am ready to go. Oh,
you're the kind of guy who likes to buy the beans at the coffee shop, take them home, grind them up, and do the whole thing yourself.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And actually, I was a dark roast guy for a long time. And then the barista said, listen, man, you're actually going to get more caffeine if you get the lighter roast. I didn't realize that, actually.
Yeah, that.
Because I guess they don't, the dark roast, they burn it more. It's more burned or something, so you lose some of the caffeine. I didn't know this. So now
I too learned that recently. Interesting.
Yeah, it's funny. So he's like, dude, you got to get the blonde. I'm like, really? Blonde roast? Ugh.
Blonde roast.
He was right. It actually has a nice kick to it.
Right. And, that's a fitting introduction to our conversation here, I would say, as fitting as any. But so with your two recent albums, that one there, we just heard the title track, Sinking Houseboat Confusion, and The Mystery at Clown Castle. And so first off, along with yourself on alto saxophone, right?
Yes.
And other instruments as well. But
right. Yep.
we heard you playing alto saxophone, those tracks that we listened to there. And you also play flute, a couple of different kinds of flutes? Or just the regular?
Yeah, I do some flute and piccolo on that album.
Piccolo,
yeah.
Right. And are you holding an oboe as well in the photograph on the back of the album?
I am. We only did a little bit of oboe on that record. Oboe's a tough, instrument to really get into the music a lot, at least with this kind of music. So we just kind of got it in there a little bit. My producer, MP Kuo, she's a phenomenal musician. She's also a woodwind player, but she's an engineer and producer, and she was really good about saying, okay, this is going to work, put the piccolo on this song, the flute here, okay, let's not use the oboe too much. She just had a good ear for that, so.
Great. And so just want to mention Daniel Bennett here. You've been voted Best New Jazz by Hot House. Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
And you're also, as I see here, an endorsing artist for Morgan Mouthpieces. That's probably more important than people realize. And you're also featured in Washington Post, NPR, Boston Globe. So some good exposure there for you. And so I'm honored to be part of that whole chain of getting the word out about Daniel Bennett Group, and it's been a fun ride so far. So tell me, let's start with Sinking Houseboat Confusion. From the title, let's go from there. What is that about, and how did this all take shape in terms of the title of the project, as well as, obviously titles are significant to you and your group, and tell me also a little bit about the band and how it all meshes together, because obviously you're not in the mold of, say, the John Coltrane or Miles Davis quintet, so although that influence is there. So
you noticed that?
Yeah. So Sinking Houseboat Confusion, what's the deal with that?
Yeah, a lot of it is just finding funny words that make people laugh and have a reaction. I mean, there's not always a lot of deep meaning to the album song, the titles, the track titles, the album title. So Sinking Houseboat Confusion was just a funny thing that popped into my head. That's about the extent of it. It gets people smiling. They ask questions. They listen in a different way sometimes. I find that sometimes having an overly deep meaning or title to the song can actually just frustrate the listener too, because then they have to figure out what you're trying to do or what your message is. And let's be honest, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It's been proven, especially I talk about this a lot on Twitter. I'm very active, and I've talked about this a lot, that, having a message, especially with instrumental music, can be pretty frustrating for the listener. They often, jazz, from the onset, jazz can have an air of pretentiousness. So let's have some fun with it, have some funny song titles. And of course, as you pointed out, I'm not even sure this would be considered jazz at this point. Doesn't bother me if you call it jazz or not. I don't have any label for the music. I don't describe our music much anymore. If a writer has a cool description of the music, I'll definitely share that with people, but I really want the listener to interpret. It's a lot more enjoyable, I think, for the audience.
Yeah. But you don't mind being called jazz for the sake of simplicity?
No, definitely not. And if that's what you take away from it, absolutely. I mean, this is something I don't talk about a lot. I'm one of those, people who really learned to play jazz on the street. And, I was playing literally on the street when I was a kid in high school, playing at the bus stop in Rochester, New York. I went to a music school, but I studied classical saxophone, believe it or not, at New England Conservatory. So, but the whole time when I was there, I was always a jazz musician. I was writing, I was composing, and I was an improviser. But so jazz is a big part of who I am. There's a thread of that in my music, but certainly there's really no jazz agenda for me. And I tell people that we often float in and out of the jazz scene. So we just did our CD release of the Blue Note, but then, a month later we were playing in rock clubs, or we were touring and playing at, different types of venues that, we play in classical venues. I just wrapped a theater production that my band played in at the Whitney Museum, playing opera excerpts for woodwinds and banjo called Whitman at the Whitney. So we kind of float into different scenes, and I love that. So we don't put up a lot of stylistic boundaries. I really try not to describe our music because it kind of nauseates people, and I understand that. So it makes it more fun. It's enjoyable. It's good that way.
I definitely understand where you're coming from in terms of not wanting to put too many words into listeners' consciousness about, this is you're going to be listening to this kind of music.
How much, the whole, well, my drummer is from here, so you're going to hear 30% of this type of music, and then I'm from Rochester, so you're going to hear this. That's ridiculous. I mean, I just think most of that's just kind of like talk, and I think the listener just wants to listen and enjoy on their own terms.
Right. I see you've got two adorable children. You've posted some pictures online. They look like a lot of fun.
They are.
Do they enjoy?
Never a dull moment.
They enjoy having a musician father. Is that fun?
I hope they do. The funny thing is, how kids are. They're just kids. I mean, to me, I'm dad, and I love that. That's the way it should be. Right. And actually, they're also the reason I get up at 6 a.m. because they're up even before I am. So. Right.
Boy and a girl. How old are they?
My son is almost 2. My son Hudson, and my daughter Naomi is almost 4. So. There's a lot of activity in the apartment. And actually, it's funny, this morning that my wife and kids are checking out. We're moving to a different apartment pretty soon, a slightly larger place, so we can actually fit a family of 4 on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. It's not easy. So we found something where we can do that. So we're looking to get a new place. So they're over there right now checking it out. My wife has more of an eye for that kind of thing than I do, so I leave all of that stuff up to her.
I can totally relate. So
right.
Same here. But so were you the child of a musician as well?
I was not.
Okay.
I was not.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, yeah, my two sisters, Erin and Kristen, older sisters, played clarinet, and so I always loved hearing them practice. But I wanted to play saxophone. I was in fourth grade. I heard a high school kid named Chris Oldfield. He was playing the Pink Panther. I hear this story from a lot of musicians, but it's real. It happened to me too. I heard a kid play Pink Panther, big surprise, and I was hooked. And my sister Kristen took me to see the high school jazz concerts a lot at the school. So I got to hear music and was really excited. And both my parents were very supportive. You know, they're the kind of people who, if we were into sports, they'd be right there with us. Or if we're into music, then they're going to be right there at the concerts. So, but I did all the school band stuff as a kid all the way through, but I was also very active on my own, playing in groups. I was playing rock. I taught myself to play guitar in high school, you know, picked up all the doubles, flute, clarinet kind of along the way. And so I was kind of just really, really motivated to play music with people as a kid.
Yeah. And you're, of course, in Rochester growing up, which is, I know from experience, having been to the Eastman School for a summer, the very good small city for music. I mean, it's obviously not New York City, but it's pretty good.
Oh, it's a great city. It's a great city. We just got back. We did a concert at Roberts Wesleyan College, and we go to Rochester probably about 2 or 3 times a year to play. We're going to be back there in October doing some concerts. It's a great city. It's a really great city. So, you know, I had a good experience. I love it. My parents still live there. It's a great town.
And you had we spoke on the phone last night, and you were telling me about how you had studied with Jerry Bergonzi and George Garzone at New England Conservatory. What was that like? What did they teach you, and what did you take from them?
It was great. I took all of Jerry Bergonzi's. He had classes where he would teach concepts from all of his books, and then I also took private lessons from him. So he was really into scale fragments, up and down intervals, just, you know, how to play a 5-note line in like 50 different ways, which can seem a little bit exhausting, but he's just really into getting you to know every inch of what is in a chord, which might sound silly, but it's funny how a lot of people don't really know, you know, okay, what's in a C major 7 chord? Well, I don't know, C, E, G, B. Well, there's more, you know, there's a 9th, sharp 11th, there's a 13th. So just, you know, bringing that all to life. Jerry was amazing at that. And George was also equally amazing at his concept was the chromatic triad approach, where he would get you to play crazy triads and link them with chromatic notes. And it sounds kind of wonky, but he had this really cool concept of how to use chromaticism in your soloing. And he also taught me to the very simple thing, but also it was very genius, to invert chords. I mean, that's another thing. You know, when you play, inverting a triad is so simple in a way, changing the order of the notes in a triad, but it's also hard to do. So it was good for me to do that. And I also took classical lessons from Ken Radnofsky, who was a great saxophonist, plays with the Boston Symphony, Boston Pop. So Ken was also kind of kicking my butt quite a bit during that time. So I had a lot of things to learn there.
Right. A lot of people don't, well, I mean, some don't care at all. But, I mean, so those who are music fans, when it comes to thinking of a symphony orchestra, classical music, you don't often think of saxophones for some reason.
Right.
Right. But there's I'm sure, an extensive repertoire for the instrument.
There is,
right?
And you know, you hear it a lot in the French music, French composers, Ibert, Glazunov, Desenclos, Bizet. You know, there's some, you know, there's even some early or some romantic era, like Rachmaninoff actually used saxophone. He has a famous piece called Symphonic Dances where there's a saxophone solo.
Right.
I mean, who would have thought, you know? And then in the 20th century, a lot of chamber music was written for saxophone. So there's a huge culture of classical saxophone. It's a little bit of a cult, not unlike jazz in a way. Actually, there's a little bit of a cult thing going on with classical saxophone, but it's really cool. It's some really cool stuff.
I mean, years ago, you know, his brother Wynton was all over the place with the classical music. So Branford Marsalis figured, okay, why not? And he did the Romances for Saxophone album. I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yes.
You know, to kind of put that in the public consciousness a little more, in the music fans, to say, you know, saxophone is a valid instrument, or, you know, not only my brother on the trumpet playing the classical music, we all know about that, but what about saxophone in classical music is very valid. So
I think Branford.
You mentioned you played with the Portland Symphony Orchestra as well, right?
I did some gigs with them when I was I lived in Boston for about 7 years. So as we were talking, you know, I went to Maine quite a bit, Portland, Maine, played with the Portland Symphony, you know, when they, you know, just a few times if they needed a saxophone.
Was that when Shimada was at the helm?
What's that?
Was that when Shimada was at the helm, or who was conducting?
Gosh, you know what? I don't even remember. Is that terrible? I was in college. So. It was a blur.
Sure. You're kind of a wunderkind up from Boston to kind of do a little thing.
Right.
A little classical jaunt.
Little classical jaunt is good for the body, you know.
Yeah. Do you think
you know, as in music, you're always doing, every night's different. I mean, every night is different. You're doing theater, classical, jazz. I mean, I actually didn't like that I was a classical major for many years. Now I appreciate that I studied classical at NEC. So, you know,
how do you think
everything is useful?
How do you think being a classical major and studying it all through college enhanced your, not only your life as a jazz musician, but just as a musician as a whole?
Well, it made me a better musician, period. I mean, I had to play with a tuner and metronome and do crazy articulations.
What do you mean better musician, period? What exactly does that mean?
It was so, it's so regimented. They were very strict in the classical program, which I hated. I mean, we all hated. I really, believe me, I played in as many jazz groups at NEC as I could. I played with Bob Moses, the drummer. I tried to do so many things to cleanse myself of the classical thing. But I look back on it, and the classical thing was so huge. It's very strict, and it teaches you to just master your instrument.
But you like classical music, don't you?
I do. I love it, and I don't see any. I don't look at the stylistic boundaries. So to me, it's perfectly legit to play a classical gig and then launch into a jazz thing. I don't see any boundaries in that. It shocks me that people still to this day have trouble, you know, thinking that you can do both. But you know, you can float and do things, and it's helped me with my theater doubling. I do a lot of pit orchestra, Broadway, off-Broadway stuff. The classical training has really helped me in that sense, because when you're in an orchestra pit, you got to play in tune, you have to blend, you have to listen. There's so many things that I learned at NEC that have translated into my theater playing.
Mm-hmm. So since you're a saxophonist and a wind player and a reed player, the key to your success is obviously based on a lot of different things, both physically and mentally. The physical part, describe the physical part first, and then, you know, if you wouldn't mind, some of your attitudes and approaches to the instruments, I should say, sorry, that you play.
The physical, you mean what?
Yeah, I mean, what
physically?
What do you think goes into being an accomplished saxophonist, reed player, flautist, if you want to use that pronunciation, both physically and mentally? Yeah.
It takes total control and focus. I mean, it's like athletic focus and control. I mean, it's very intense. It has taken many years and making a lot of mistakes a lot of mistakes. I mean, believe me, anybody who's playing full time will agree with me that you will make far more mistakes in your career than you ever will succeed. You'll make more mistakes. It's just you don't talk about the mistakes. You don't tell. You don't broadcast that. You know, the beauty of social media, we only tell people the good things, right? So,
yes.
But yeah, it's trial and error, making a lot of mistakes and being hyper focused, and also being a very responsible, good person, having good morals, good ethics, because you're going to be challenged, and you have to really be a good person and try your hardest to love and forgive and fit into any situation. I mean, believe me, when I'm on tour, touring, you're kind of like king of the castle. It's just your band, and you're kind of going around doing your thing. But then when you're in an orchestra pit, you're just this little block in the puzzle, and someone's telling you how to play or how to fit into the group, and it's a very structured. It's much different, and you have to adjust on the fly. So it's challenging.
And so, in terms of the physical aspect and kind of being an athletic endeavor, almost, obviously you got to keep your mouth in shape, and do you do like breathing exercises? Do you have a certain way of preparing for a gig? Do you have a ritual that you typically observe before you hit the stage?
Right. I mean, I practice every day. And my practice, if you were to hear me practice, it would not sound very exciting to most people, because, when I'm practicing, it's, again, tuner, metronome, scales, rudiments, playing through classical repertoire, playing with CDs, playing, jazz, tedious stuff, long tones. So that, and I always have my instrument out. I teach at the New York Jazz Academy in Times Square, and I literally have the saxophone around my neck for, I don't even know, 4 or 5 hours of teaching. And so it's part of me. I've decided that in order to really excel, it has to be a natural part of you. And as a busy adult with kids and a family, you have to be creative to make sure that horn is always part of you. So it's all encompassing. There's a lot of different ways that I prepare, but it's just a lot of things. It's really a lot of things.
Sure. I mean, you've got a few videos online where you're demonstrating some techniques, how to play chords and that kind of thing. So you make it look like practicing can be fun. It appears that you're having a pretty good time. And I had a teacher who actually told me that if you live in the city, this is when I was in Boston, I guess the same is true in any city, you will learn to play very, very, very quietly. You'll have your soft piano sound. Yeah. You have it down if you live in the city. I'm a drummer, so that... Oh,
you are?
Yeah. So that can be a challenge. Oh. That can be a challenge. But then you get the brushes out and...
But I could only dream of living in beautiful Maine, by the way. I mean, we were talking about that yesterday.
Oh, right.
I mean, you must have the best views in your house.
We actually do. We do have some good views, and I say that feeling very fortunate, because when you buy a house anywhere, who knows what you're going to get for views. So that's for sure. Yeah. I think that's part of it. I think that if you don't have a decent view that you can live with, you probably aren't going to settle in there, is my guess.
True.
Right?
This is true.
So maybe here you are in Manhattan. So obviously your views are going to be of a different nature, but
they are.
But there's a lot to be said for city views. Inspire kind of a romantic image of.
That's true.
Of whatever that means. There's something about a city view, especially at night, really, right?
Oh, yeah.
That
now, when I lived
captivates.
in Boston, I actually lived in Kenmore Square, so I was right across from Fenway Park. So there, I mean, I don't know if I'll ever be able to top that view, because that was incredible.
That sounds pretty phenomenal, yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, you're listening to WBOR Brunswick 91.1 FM and WBOR.org, and this is the Peter Paluska Show. My guest today is Daniel Bennett of the Daniel Bennett Group, or actually you just call it Daniel Bennett Group. I guess there's no "the" on it.
It's up to you.
Yeah, I guess whatever.
Leave that up to the listener.
And your bandmates are, let me read their names here. I think I can do it. Let me read their names here. I think I can do it. It's Matthew, is it Fike?
You got it.
Okay,
yep.
On the drums. And Nat, I'm going to go for it, Yanoff.
You're close.
Janoff, okay.
J, yeah.
This is the J sound on the electric guitar. And at now and then, you still do play with Eddie Kalmovich on electric and acoustic bass?
Yes.
Kalmovich.
Yeah. Yeah,
Kalmovich.
Any quartet gig will have Eddie on bass.
Sure. Yeah.
But as a lot of groups do when they tour, the instrumentation gets smaller to make it, we do about 150 tour dates a year. We're about to go out to San Francisco next month, and my guitarist is packing 1,000 guitar pedals and loopers to basically fill up the sound because we're not going to have bass on the tour. So,
so San Francisco, excellent. So you think you'll make it over to Berkeley for that?
Oh, I would love to.
Yeah,
we don't have anything scheduled in Berkeley, but we'll probably end up going there to hang out for a day.
Definitely. You should stop by my brother's restaurant over there. He's got an excellent Mexican restaurant called Comal. A little bit of free publicity here.
Comal.
Comal, C-O-M-A-L.
We'll do it.
Check it out.
We actually love Mexican food. My drummer Matt is a big foodie, so we end up hitting some great spots. That's awesome.
Right.
We'll check it out.
Should definitely do that. Just wanted to kind of talk about your musical style for Daniel Bennett Group in particular here. How much of it is your conscious decision to push the boundaries and write and perform music that is unusual and inventive and not following the straight-ahead jazz tradition of, swing it for a little bit, do a little Latin groove here and there over the solo, then come back around and play the chorus, maybe a drum solo, trade fours and out. As opposed to, just following your natural inclination to write certain kind of music.
Right. Well, you hit it right on the head, Peter. I mean, following your natural inclination there is no other way, right? And look, and I've said this too, if your natural inclination is to play straight ahead jazz, I've got some friends who are insanely amazing at all they do is play straight ahead jazz, and that's really what they feel, then it's great. I love that.
But you play some of that as well, of course.
What's that?
You play a lot of that as well, right?
We do. I mean,
or just you, singular you.
What's that? Straight ahead jazz?
Yeah.
Well, to me, it's if it's got I'm a melody guy, so if it's got a great melody, I'm hooked. If it happens to swing, fine, we swing. If the melody is king for me. Or if it's people ask, well, what do you think of the state of jazz? What do you think? None of that really bothers me, because to me, sometimes I'm jazz. We float in and out. If it's got a great melody, then I'm right there. So that's kind of how I gauge it. Right.
Well, what is your hope for your music? What do you hope it accomplishes outside of just pleasing yourself?
I hope it entertains people. Period. I mean, that is my only hope. It's instrumental music, so again, already no social message to my music. None. Believe me, the world does not need to hear another jazz song with some hidden social message that I'm supposed to study every note and figure out what that is pretentiousness, and nobody likes that. I'm not trying to say that I disagree or agree with what artists are doing, what their message is, but I just think that the concept of having some deep meaning that the listener, or being so hip that the listener has to sit there and really figure you out, is ridiculous. That's why jazz jazz is dying in a lot of ways, and I actually don't mean that in a bad way, because all of the great new music is starting to come up. You hear it all the time. I was just listening to Rudresh Mahantampa yesterday. My wife
what
and I
a great saxophonist, right?
Yeah,
he just came up to Maine a few years ago.
Oh, did he?
With Rez Abbasi.
Jazz? It doesn't bother me if someone thinks maybe it's jazz. Maybe who cares? That is the kind of music that is happening, and so when I say that certain elements of jazz with a big J that's dying, I don't mean that in a negative way, Peter. I mean it's being replaced with vibrant, great music that you hear all over the world now. That's happening, and it's being birthed. It's being shared on the internet, and it's a really exciting time. And in that, in that there are some straight ahead groups. Jason Palmer, great trumpet player in Boston, plays at Wally's. He's at a residency there every week. Straight ahead player, totally honest, amazing musician, amazing music. So someone like Jason is thriving, and he's right there with all of the other music that's happening. So it's not that I'm trying to say, let's just get rid of anything that's traditional. That's not what I'm saying. But, we have a great period right now where I guess it's the honest voices are coming to the top. And the more dishonest voices are thankfully going away, or, I don't know.
Just realizing it's maybe time to pack it up and head home.
Well, yeah. We need more honesty in what we're hearing.
Sure.
The world doesn't need another version of Stella by Starlight. Believe me, we just don't. We don't. We need honest voices who are creating new things and new sounds.
Yeah.
It's a very exciting time. There's new venues popping up everywhere. This is also something that bothers me. I tweet about this a lot. Some people get very depressed and they want to talk about, oh no, a jazz venue might go out of business and this is horrible. And meanwhile, they're ignoring the fact that right now, literally, there's hundreds or thousands of new little venues that are popping up and starting, and no one's talking about them because we all want to sit here and moan because, oh no, the Cornelia Street Cafe might go out of business. By the way, they're not going out of business.
I actually thought of that as you were saying that.
Right. This is about a month ago, and I was talking about this with people online, and there was this, oh no, and then this is the death of the jazz scene. This is the death of whatever. No, and there's millions of new venues popping up, and no one wants to talk about that. And by the way, big surprise, Cornelia Street Cafe is fine. I don't know. I mean, I know they still they need money. I shouldn't say they're fine, but I mean, the point is, what we're seeing, Peter, are they're spectator musicians who all they do, they're reactionaries. That's a good word. They react. They're reactionaries. That's all they do. They don't produce content. You produce a great radio show. You're actually putting your money where your mouth is. You're putting yourself on the air. But there are people who are just reactionaries. They just watch from the safety of their home on their computer, and they're not producing any content. And those are the people who, unfortunately, you just see them pop up a lot on the internet, especially, and it's a cancer to the music. It's actually it's a disease, and that kind of thinking, when these people start running their mouth, it's very dangerous. People who say that jazz is dead, or music, or the New York scene, anyone who said, if you go to the doctor and you're perfectly healthy and the doctor says, Peter, you have pneumonia, even if you don't, guess what? You're going to feel sick. By the time you get to your car in the parking lot, you're going to feel sick. You're going to think that you're sick. And that's what we see happen constantly in music, is people, negativity, people make these statements that jazz is dead, or this is dying, or, you'll never make it as a musician because, whatever. People believe that, and that bit gets shared, and then you start to have symptoms. You start to think that about the music scene. But the music scene is healthy. It's really healthy and it's vibrant.
Well, it's like when people say, oh, the novel is dead, or, the blog is dead. Just like fill in the blank is dead is a fairly popular kind of rallying cry to,
you're right. You're right. You know what? That's a good point. In almost any discipline, you see that. Right. And usually what they're actually saying is they're dead. The person who's writing that is dead. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but usually when someone feels like they're so discouraged, then they'll project that onto everyone else.
Right. But you're inspired.
Which is really sad.
But I can feel that you're inspired, and as a result, you're inspiring others.
Well, I hope so. Believe me, we do a lot of jazz clinics around the country, and I'll tell you this much: these kids, they're not dead. They don't even care. Do you think they care about the Cornelia Street Cafe? We did a clinic in Deltona, Florida. These kids were incredible. They're playing all over. They live in a small town, and they're playing, and they got their bands, and this was out of high school. And they don't care if they're not into the negativity like some of these self-obsessed people are that you see on Twitter. I call it the chronically depressed jazz community. These kids aren't aware of that. They don't care. They're too busy creating. It's great. Yeah,
and I think you keep that momentum going. And, the jazz venues create themselves as a kind of a manifestation of necessity. They just they're needed after, once there are these incredibly talented musicians flooding the scene, then people want to hear them. And the audience...
People do.
The audience grows. I think the audience is growing. It's a little less perceptible than, say, other phenomena, or maybe actually I actually check myself right there, because then I say, well, wait, maybe it's actually a little more perceptible because of its more under the radar nature, than most pop music trends.
Right, but by nature, the audience, the listeners, there's a certain vibrancy because it's a smaller community. And I will say this too. This is something that also came up in the clinic that I recently did. The general public actually wants. This is a crazy thing. The jazz establishment is tiny, and that is dying. The whole this tiny little model that they created in the 80s with the certain publications and certain things, that's dying. Good, thank goodness. The general public actually wants musicians and young musicians to be original and to be free thinkers and to do new things. So actually the whole world in a way is kind of on our side. I mean, I know that sounds kind of strange, but people will love individuality. They love individuality. Trust me. I mean, I told these students, I had a kid who plays in a wedding band at this clinic, and he said, yeah, we do a lot of jazz at weddings, and, nobody really listens. And I encouraged them. I said, man, play one of your own songs at a wedding. I guarantee you people are going to look at you and perk up a little bit and smile because they're going to recognize the honesty. So the
or something
world
different
is ours. Yeah, something different.
Yeah. I mean, I think the point here is, again, jazz as a signpost, as just, that when someone says, oh, I've got some jazz for you to listen to, or tonight we're going to go to a gig, it's a jazz group, hearing that, the attitude in your mind should be, well, that could be a lot of things. That could mean so many different kinds of music. And to stop expecting, a straight ahead chorus, verse, chorus, bridge, solo, trade eights, back to the chorus. I mean, that there's a time where I really want that. I mean, that's often actually, but nevertheless, it's all a big buffet table, though, isn't it?
It is. And it comes,
I may have caught you off guard with the buffet analogy there.
Well,
but,
now I'm hungry. That's why you're making me hungry, but that's good.
Yeah. I think there's an all-you-can-eat brunch somewhere near you, since you're in Manhattan, right?
I think so. There's one uptown. I think I'm gonna hit it right after this interview.
An interview can make one hungry, for sure. Right?
It does.
For more music as well as food, but this is why I love your show, to be honest with you, because I think that you're one of these people who gets it. What you're saying is so true.
sure. If you're honest and you want, and that's your language to play the 32-bar form, trade some solos, great. If it's honest, I'm there. I'm right there with you.
Definitely.
But there's, the buffet table. There you go. It's the whole buffet table. There's so much going on that you can also include in that. It's great.
Yeah. Well, definitely. And it's been a pleasure. Daniel Bennett is my guest today, and originally from Rochester, New York, went to school in Boston, lived right across from Fenway Park at one point. A lot of little fun tidbits of your summary there, but also another little factoid, has not yet traveled to Japan apparently, but that's definitely on your list, though, right?
No, and
we were talking about that.
I love that you lived in Japan. So you and I are going to have to talk about this, because when I get over there to tour, you're going to be my liaison. You'll help me out.
Oh yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, with pleasure. Sure. So the tune I'd like to wrap up this interview with here is a fun tune. It's got another title that I appreciate, and again, obviously your fondness for the animal community is indicated and on display here on both albums. We have a lizard, we've got a platypus. Let's see here. We've got and then we've got the piglets, the zebra, and this tune here, Uncle Muskrat.
That's right.
And
yes.
This tune is a lot of fun because it has a pretty straight ahead kind of rock beat, but it's got Eddie Kaimovich on acoustic bass,
right?
And it's a nice kind of interplay, very very engaging between you and pianist Jason Yeager.
Yeah,
and so
Jason Yeager is
just if you wouldn't mind, just introduce this tune and what it's all about for you.
Yeah. Well, The Old Muskrat Welcomes Us was the original title on an album called Clockhead Goes to Camp, and then it became Uncle Muskrat as the song matured. So Jason Yeager is a good friend who I play with quite a bit, pianist. And we stripped it down as a trio format for the just piano, acoustic bass, and alto saxophone.
Sure.
And in a way, it's a very, very simple form, and simple melodies, which is great. I'm a simple man, so simple is good. So that's my introduction, it's a fun song. We still play it every night. It's a great song.
Excellent. Uncle Muskrat with my special guest today, Daniel Bennett on the alto saxophone, Jason Yeager on piano, and Eddie Kaimovich on the acoustic bass. I think Matthew is sitting out that one. Is that right?
Yeah, he's getting the buffet.
He's at the buffet table, right?
He's at the buffet.
But Eddie has a kind of Milt Hinton-esque percussion style on the bass here, which is nice.
Yeah,
almost basically not a replacement for, but an alternative to a drum track kind of thing.
Right, and actually, if you listen, I think we overdubbed egg shakers. That's me doing my egg shaking debut. I'm double-fisted egg, the little egg
excellent.
Shaking like a beast.
Okay.
I think we did that on this one. So
fantastic. From the CD, The Mystery at Clown Castle, which if we're adapted into a film, Lord knows where that could go, right?
Right.
If you use this as the soundtrack, just make the film in reverse, based on this music. That could be a lot of fun.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. But excellent. Well, it's been such a great pleasure to have you on the show, Daniel. It's been a long time coming, safe to say, and glad that we could finally put this together.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. And you have a great show.
Thank you for reaching out to me originally and saying hello. The modern day equivalent of walking down the street and just getting my attention, and say, "Hey, excuse me," and really appreciate that.
Twitter, yep, it's good.
Yeah. So, and thank you for all the kind words, and I congratulate you on your last two wonderful albums and your fine career as it is now.